The Grand Assembly Hall stretched out like a cathedral of glass and light. 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each area modified to suit their particular needs. Some breathed methane through specialized masks. Others floated in gravitational bubbles. A few existed as pure energy, contained within crystalline matrices that hummed with soft power. Ambassador Taman Park stood at the human delegation's modest station near the back of the hall. His dark suit looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and biological displays around him. Beside him, his aides Hyunwoo and Jiwon reviewed data on their tablets, their faces carefully neutral. The Valorian Chancellor, Korthax, dominated the central platform. His crystalline body refracted light into rainbow patterns across the chamber floor. When he spoke, his voice resonated through translation devices implanted in every delegate's ear. "We have considered humanity's requests for 3 full cycles," Korthax announced. "The Council has reached a decision that demonstrates our generosity and forward thinking." Taemin felt Hyunwoo tense beside him. They had heard this tone before. It meant the Council was about to offer something they considered magnificent, while actually giving nothing of substance. "Humanity will be granted junior membership status," Korthax continued. "You will have voting rights on cultural matters and minor trade disputes. This is an unprecedented honor for such a young species." The Threxian representative, a massive insectoid creature named Cleth, clicked its mandibles in what passed for laughter among its kind. Several other delegates joined in with their own species-specific expressions of amusement. The humans were being put in their place and everyone knew it. "Regarding trade regulations," Korthax went on, "the current tariff structure will remain in place. Human goods will continue to be subject to safety inspections and quality controls, as befits their primitive origin. This protects our citizens from substandard products." Taemin watched the terms appear on the holographic display floating before him. The tariffs averaged 40% on human exports, while council species paid less than 5%. The inspections could take months, often long enough for human goods to expire or become obsolete. Finally, regarding technology sharing, Korthax said, "Humanity will provide full access to all scientific research and technological developments. The Council will review these submissions and share what it deems appropriate in return. This ensures galactic security and prevents dangerous innovations from destabilizing civilization." It was the worst deal they could have offered. Junior membership meant no real voice. The tariffs would strangle human trade. And one-way technology sharing meant humanity would give everything while receiving nothing. Jiwon leaned close to Taemin and whispered, "They're not even pretending anymore." Taemin nodded slightly. She was right. The Council had decided that humanity needed them more than they needed humanity. Earth's military was small. Humans depended on galactic trade routes for resources. They had no leverage, or so the Council believed. "Ambassador Park," Korthax said, his crystalline form turning to focus light directly on the human delegation. "Does humanity accept these terms?" The entire assembly fell silent. This was the moment where the humans would bow their heads, express gratitude for the Council's wisdom, and accept their subordinate position. It had happened with every other junior species. The pattern was well established. Taemin stood slowly. He walked forward to the speaking platform reserved for responses, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Hyunwoo and Jiwon remained at their station, watching him with expressions that revealed nothing. "Chancellor Korthax, honored delegates," Taemin began, his voice calm and measured, "I want to thank the Council for making its position so clear. You have answered questions that humanity has been asking for 3 cycles." There was a subtle shift in the chamber. Something in Taemin's tone wasn't quite right. It wasn't the usual defeated acceptance. "We came here seeking partnership," Taemin continued. "We believed that different species could work together as equals, each contributing their unique strengths to a greater civilization." "We were wrong," murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Valorian Chancellor's crystalline body flickered with what might have been confusion or anger. "The Council has shown us that it doesn't want partners," Taemin said. "It wants subjects. It wants species it can exploit for resources and labor, while maintaining control over their development and autonomy." "Ambassador Park," Korthax interrupted, his voice sharp, "you forget yourself. The Council offers you membership in the greatest civilization in galactic history." "And we respectfully decline," Taemin said. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began speaking at once in a cacophony of sounds that overwhelmed the translation systems. Korthax's crystalline form blazed with bright light. Cleth rose from its seat, mandibles clicking rapidly. Taman waited for the noise to subside, standing calmly at the platform. When the assembly finally quieted, he continued. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all council proceedings. We are recalling all human ambassadors, diplomats, and representatives from council space. All existing trade agreements are terminated. All cooperative programs are ended. You're making a mistake, Korthax said, his voice containing an edge of threat. Earth cannot survive without council protection and trade access. Perhaps, Taman acknowledged. But we'd rather face that uncertainty with our dignity intact than prosper as your servants. He gathered his tablet and turned to leave. Hyunwoo and Jiwon fell in step beside him. The three humans walked toward the chamber exit with measured steps, neither hurrying nor hesitating. You'll be back, Cleth called out. Within a cycle, you'll be begging for even these terms. Taman paused at the doorway and looked back at the assembly. Maybe. Or maybe you'll realize what you've lost when we're gone. Either way, humanity chooses freedom over subjugation. Every time they walked out, leaving chaos behind them. The assembled species immediately began arguing. Some laughed, dismissing humanity's departure as a temporary tantrum. Others looked worried, beginning to calculate what the withdrawal might mean. In the Valorian section, an analyst named Sung-hee was already pulling up economic data on her terminal. Her assistant, Bora, leaned over her shoulder, watching the numbers scroll past. Should we be concerned? Bora asked. Humans are only 2.3% of galactic GDP, Sung-hee replied. Their military is negligible. They'll be back within months, desperate for our terms. But even as she said it, Sung-hee felt a small flutter of uncertainty. The way Ambassador Park had walked out, calm and certain, didn't seem like desperation. It seemed like something else entirely. It seemed like a plan. Across the chamber, Korthax was already composing messages to the Valorian High Command, assuring them that humanity's departure was insignificant, a minor inconvenience at worst. The Council would endure as it always had. None of them yet understood what was about to happen. They couldn't imagine that the species they had just dismissed would be the one to bring their entire civilization to its knees. Not through war, not through conquest, but through simple absence. The humans were leaving, and soon the galaxy would learn exactly what that meant. Dr. Sung-hee sat in her office on the Valorian homeworld, surrounded by holographic displays showing economic data from across Council space. Her assistant Bora was at the adjacent desk, running calculations through the quantum processors that hummed softly in the walls. They had been tasked with assessing the damage from humanity's departure. The Valorian High Command wanted numbers, projections, and recommendations. Most importantly, they wanted confirmation that humanity's dramatic exit would amount to nothing. Initial figures look manageable, Sung-hee said, reviewing the first wave of reports. Humans represent 2.3% of total galactic GDP. Their military contribution is minimal. Most of their technology is derivative of Council innovations. Bora nodded, making notes on her tablet. The High Command will be pleased. Should I prepare the standard recall protocol? We can offer them slightly better terms to save face, and they'll return within the month. Sung-hee was about to agree when something caught her eye in the data stream, a small anomaly in the labor statistics. She pulled up the full report and frowned. Bora, look at this. The human labor distribution doesn't match their economic contribution. Bora moved to Sung-hee's display. The numbers were indeed strange. Humans made up only a small percentage of the galactic economy, but they represented a much larger percentage of the actual workforce in certain sectors. Run a cross-reference, Sung-hee ordered. Show me every sector where human workers exceed 10% of the total labor force. The results appeared on the screen, and both Valorians fell silent. The list was long, very long. Humans operated 87% of mining facilities in hazardous zones. They staffed 73% of waste management systems across Council space. They maintained 64% of aging infrastructure on outer rim stations. They provided 58% of emergency medical personnel in frontier regions. That can't be right, Bora said. Why would they dominate these sectors if they're such a small part of the economy? Sung-hee was already pulling up more detailed reports. As she read, a cold sensation spread through her crystalline structure. Because these are the jobs no one else wants to do. The picture became clearer with each report she reviewed. Humans had a cultural peculiarity that other species found baffling. They volunteered for dangerous work. They took jobs in extreme environments. They handled biological hazards that made other species refuse assignments. Mining asteroids near unstable stars. Humans did it. Maintaining fusion reactors that occasionally leaked radiation. Humans were there. Treating patients with horrifying diseases in poorly equipped frontier hospitals. Human doctors and nurses staffed those facilities. Look at this, Sung-hee said, highlighting a section of the report. Terminus Hub. 17,000 human workers. They maintain the power systems, operate the waste recyclers, staff the emergency services, and run the mining operations in the nearby asteroid field. Can't the station replace them? Bora asked. Sung-hee shook her head. The Threxians refused to work with reactor systems they considered dangerous. The Valorian workers we sent last cycle complained about the radiation exposure and requested transfer within days. The Cathani can't handle the biological waste from 47 different species. She pulled up more examples. Station after station showed the same pattern. Humans had become the backbone of the Council's infrastructure, but they had done it so quietly, so efficiently, that no one had noticed. They weren't building gleaming towers or commanding fleets. They were fixing sewage systems and hauling garbage and mining radioactive ore. They're the ones doing all the work nobody wants to acknowledge, Sung-hee said quietly. Bora was reviewing medical staffing data now, and her voice carried a note of panic. Sung-hee, the frontier hospitals are entirely dependent on human medical personnel. Species like the Cathani have such complex biochemistry that only humans have bothered to study it properly. If the human doctors leave, then thousands of Cathani patients will die because no one else knows how to treat them. Sung-hee finished. She was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. She spent the next 6 hours digging deeper. Every sector revealed the same truth. Humans weren't visible at the top levels of galactic society because they were too busy keeping the foundation intact. They translated languages between species that had incompatible communication methods. They mediated disputes in regions too dangerous or politically sensitive for official council presence. They crewed the cargo ships that traveled routes considered too risky for more valuable species. We've been exploiting them, Bora said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sung-hee didn't respond immediately. She was running projections now, calculating what would happen as human workers withdrew. The models were clear and terrifying. Within 1 month, minor infrastructure failures would begin. Waste systems backing up, maintenance schedules slipping, small problems that seemed manageable. Within 3 months, major systems would fail. Power fluctuations, hospital shortages, mining operations shutting down. Within 6 months, complete infrastructural collapse across multiple sectors, stations abandoned, trade routes disrupted, species unable to receive critical medical care. The Council has been surviving on human labor, Sung-hee said, and we never even realized it because we thought work like waste management and maintenance was beneath notice. She compiled her report carefully, documenting every finding with precise data. The conclusions were unavoidable. Humanity's departure would cause cascading failures throughout Council space. The economic damage would be catastrophic. Species would suffer. Some might even face extinction if they couldn't adapt quickly enough. Sung-hee transmitted the report directly to the Valorian High Command, marking it as urgent priority. Then she waited for their response. It came 3 hours later. She read it twice, unable to believe what she was seeing. The High Command thanked her for her analysis but disagreed with her conclusions. Humans were a minor species, the response stated. Any short-term disruptions would be easily managed by recruiting workers from other species. The Council's strength came from its unity and its advanced civilizations, not from human laborers doing menial tasks. The report ended with a directive. Stop wasting resources on this analysis and focus on more important matters. Sung-hee sat in silence for a long time. Bora looked at her, waiting for instructions. They don't understand, Sung-hee finally said. They can't imagine that the species they've been exploiting is the one holding everything together. What do we do? Bora asked. We watch, Sung-hee replied, and we prepare to document the collapse. Across Council space, the exodus had already begun. Human workers were packing their belongings and boarding ships bound for Earth or the outer colonies. They weren't sabotaging anything. They weren't stealing equipment or erasing data. They were simply leaving. On Terminus Hub, Captain Jae Sung of the merchant vessel Dauntless Dream was preparing his crew for departure. His engineer Young Mi was running final diagnostics on the station's reactor systems, making sure everything was documented for whoever came after them. Will they be able to maintain this? Young Mi asked, looking at the decades-old fusion reactor that she had personally kept running for the past 5 years. Jae Sung shook his head. I don't think so, but that's not our problem anymore. In the medical bay, human doctors were transferring their patients to other facilities or teaching local staff emergency procedures, but there was only so much that could be taught in a few days. Years of specialized knowledge couldn't be compressed into hurried lessons. Throughout the hub, human workers were saying goodbye to colleagues from other species. Some of those colleagues were starting to look worried. A few had already asked if the humans would reconsider. The answer was always the same: no. Back in her office, Sung-hee watched the real-time data stream showing human positions throughout council space. Each day, more markers turned red as humans withdrew. It looked like a slow-motion collapse, a foundation crumbling one support at a time. They're really doing it, Bora said, watching the same data. Yes, Sung-hee replied. And the council still doesn't understand what it means, but she understood. In the coming months, galactic civilization would learn a hard lesson about taking people for granted. About confusing quiet competence with weakness, about building an empire on the backs of those you considered inferior. The humans were leaving, and when they were gone, the council would finally understand their true value. It would be too late by then. Captain Jae Sung stood on the observation deck of the Dauntless Dream, watching Terminus Hub grow smaller in the viewport. Behind him, his crew of 43 humans sat at their stations, monitoring the departure of the last human convoy from the station. His engineer Young Mi joined him at the window, her reflection visible in the transparent alloy. 5 years I kept that reactor running, she said quietly. 5 years of 12-hour shifts, crawling through radiation-hot maintenance tunnels, fixing problems that the automated systems couldn't handle. And they never said thank you, Jae Sung replied. No, Young Mi agreed. They just expected it. Like we were machines ourselves. The navigator Dae-hyun called out from his station. Captain, I'm showing power fluctuations on Terminus Hub. Their reactor is already showing cascade warnings. Jae Sung turned to look at the readings. Young Mi had left the station 3 hours ago. It had taken exactly 3 hours for the problems to start. How bad? He asked. Not critical yet, Dae-hyun said. But the Valorian engineers they brought in aren't correcting the cascade pattern. They're treating it like a standard power fluctuation. Young Mi winced. It's not standard. That pattern means the magnetic containment is developing micro-instabilities. If they don't recalibrate the field generators in the next 6 hours, the whole system will shut down. Should we warn them? Dae-hyun asked. Jae Sung considered it for a moment, then shook his head. We gave them 2 weeks' notice. We offered to train replacement engineers. They told us that Valorian technicians were more than qualified to handle primitive human systems. They made their choice. On the main screen, they could see other human ships departing from the hub. Cargo vessels, mining ships, hospital transports, waste haulers. Hundreds of ships carrying thousands of workers who had kept Terminus Hub functioning for decades. The station had a population of 200,000 from 47 different species. Of those, 17,000 were human, less than 10%. But that 10% had been responsible for maintaining the power systems, operating the waste recyclers, staffing the emergency medical facilities, running the mining operations in the nearby asteroids, and handling 100 other critical tasks. All ships report ready for departure, Dae-hyun announced. Convoy is forming up. Take us out, Jae Sung ordered. Set course for Earth. The Dauntless Dream joined the convoy, and together they accelerated away from Terminus Hub. As they entered the jump lane that would take them back to human space, Jae Sung took one last look at the station. The lights were already flickering. 2 days later, the waste recycling system failed. Biological waste from 47 different species began to accumulate in the station's lower levels. The Threxian workers refused to go near the contaminated areas. The Valorian technicians tried to restart the system, but couldn't make sense of the modifications the humans had made over the years. 4 days later, the mining operations in the asteroid belt shut down. The automated drones had been using proprietary software that the human miners had developed. Without the humans to maintain it, the drones simply stopped working. Attempts to reprogram them failed because no one understood the underlying code. 1 week later, the hospital began turning away patients. The human doctors and nurses were gone, and the remaining medical staff couldn't treat many of the species that required specialized care. 3 Cathani patients died because no one else knew their complex biochemistry. 7 Velkar patients suffered complications because the antidote protocols the humans had developed were too complex for others to follow. 2 weeks later, the reactor shut down completely. Young me had been right about the cascade pattern. The Valorian engineers had treated it as a standard fluctuation, and the magnetic containment had collapsed. The station switched to emergency backup power, but that was only designed to last for 72 hours. 3 weeks later, Terminus Hub was evacuated. 200,000 beings abandoned the station, cramming onto whatever ships could reach them in time. Some didn't make it. The emergency evacuation systems that the humans had maintained failed at critical moments. Jae Sung watched the news broadcasts from Earth, seeing reports of Terminus Hub's collapse. He felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. "We built that place," Young Mi said, watching the same broadcasts. "We kept it alive when everyone said it was impossible." "They took us for granted," Jae Sung replied. "They thought we were replaceable." But Terminus Hub wasn't an isolated incident. Across Council space, the same pattern repeated itself. Station after station faced critical failures as human workers withdrew. The problem started small but cascaded quickly into catastrophic failures. On Velkar Station, the atmospheric processors failed, and the station had to be evacuated before the air became toxic. The human technicians who had maintained those processors for 15 years were already gone. On Threxian mining colony Gamma 7, the entire operation shut down when the human workers left. The Threxians discovered that humans had been handling all the dangerous extraction work. No other species was willing to enter the unstable tunnels. On the medical research station Kepler 9, critical experiments were lost when the power systems failed. The human engineers who understood the delicate power requirements for cryogenic storage were no longer there to prevent the failure. The communications network between species began to break down. Humans had served as translators and mediators for species with incompatible communication methods. Without them, misunderstandings multiplied. Trade negotiations fell apart. Diplomatic incidents erupted. The shipping lanes became dangerous. Human peacekeepers had patrolled the most hazardous routes, protecting convoys from pirates and raiders. With the humans gone, criminal elements grew bolder. Trade vessels were attacked. Goods were stolen. Species began refusing to travel certain routes. On Earth, Ambassador Taemin received daily reports of the chaos spreading through Council space. The Galactic Council was sending increasingly desperate messages, offering improved terms if humans would return. First they offered better voting rights. Then they offered reduced tariffs. Then they offered full technology reciprocity. Humanity didn't respond to any of them. "They still don't understand," Hyunwoo said, reviewing the latest message from the Council. "They think this is a negotiation tactic." "Let them think that," Taemin replied. "The truth will become clear soon enough." Jiwon was monitoring the diplomatic channels. 7 species have tried to contact us directly, bypassing the Council. They're offering independent trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. "Which species?" Taemin asked. "The smaller ones. The species that the Council treated the worst. They see what we did and they're wondering if they can do the same." Taemin smiled. That was the key. Humanity hadn't just left the Council. They had shown other oppressed species that it was possible to leave. That the Council's power wasn't absolute. Back on Terminus Hub, now a ghost station floating in space with failing systems and no population, automated systems continued to broadcast distress signals. But there was no one left to hear them. The station that had once been a thriving hub of commerce and culture was now a tomb. A monument to what happens when you take people for granted. Captain Jae Sung and the Dauntless Dream were already in human space, preparing to help establish new trade routes with independent systems. They weren't going back to Council territory. None of the human workers were. Young Mai stood in the engine room running diagnostics on their own reactor. It was running perfectly because she understood it. She had built it. She took pride in her work. "You know what the worst part is?" she said to Dae-hyun, who was helping with the diagnostics. "What?" "They'll blame us. They'll say we sabotaged their systems. They'll never admit that they didn't know how to run their own civilization without us. Daehyun nodded. Probably. But we know the truth. We kept their world running and they treated us like servants. When we left, everything fell apart because we were the foundation they built on. Young Mi looked at the reactor readings, all showing green. Well, now we build our own foundation. And we do it right this time. The exodus continued. Across council space, human workers made their way home. They left behind stations with failing systems, hospitals without staff, mining operations at a standstill, and waste management systems backing up. They left behind a civilization that was learning too late what it had lost. Ambassador Soo-jin stood in the command center buried deep beneath Pluto's frozen surface, watching holographic displays showing the state of council space. Red indicators marked failed stations. Yellow showed systems under strain. Green showed the few locations still operating normally. There was very little green left. Her intelligence officer, Min-soo, stood beside her, updating the tactical board with the latest reports. Another 3 stations evacuated today, he said. The Threxian Concordat is requesting emergency aid from the Valorian Empire. The Empire is refusing because they need all their resources for their own crisis. The Council is eating itself, Soo-jin observed, just as we predicted. Min-soo agreed. Soo-jin had been humanity's ambassador to the Threxian Concordat before the withdrawal. She had smiled and bowed and pretended to be grateful for the scraps they offered, all while gathering intelligence and sending it back to Earth, all while helping to build the network that would allow humanity to survive without the Council. Show me the timeline, she ordered. Min-soo pulled up a holographic display that stretched across 20 years. It showed humanity's careful preparation for this moment. The presentation had been prepared for the Leadership Council to remind them of how long they had been planning this. The timeline began shortly after humanity joined the Galactic Council as probationary members. Earth's leaders had been excited about joining galactic civilization. They had dreams of partnership and cooperation. Those dreams died quickly. Within the first year, it became clear that the Council operated on strict hierarchy. Ancient species like the Valorians held power. Younger species like humanity were expected to serve. There was no path to equality, only gradual acceptance of subordination. That's when Director Tae-min started the Long Game Initiative. Min-soo narrated as the timeline advanced. He was just a junior diplomat then. The timeline showed Tae-min's plan taking shape. If humanity couldn't fight the Council militarily, and couldn't negotiate for equality, they would need a different approach. They would make themselves indispensable, then leave. Phase 1, Min-soo continued. Integration and positioning. We encouraged our people to take jobs throughout Council space. Mining, maintenance, medical care, waste management. Every difficult or dangerous job that other species avoided. Soo-jin remembered those early years. Many humans had questioned why they were being encouraged to do the galaxy's dirty work. Some had felt insulted. But slowly, as more humans spread throughout Council territory, the strategy became clear. We weren't just doing jobs, Soo-jin said. We were becoming the foundation. Exactly. Phase 2, technology development. While we appeared to share all our innovations with the Council, we were actually holding back our best work. The timeline showed humanity's secret research projects, advanced fusion reactors that were twice as efficient as Council technology, quantum communication systems that couldn't be intercepted, faster-than-light drive improvements that could cut travel time by 30%, medical techniques that could treat previously incurable conditions. None of these innovations had been shared with the Council. Humanity had pretended to be technologically inferior, while quietly advancing beyond galactic standards. Phase 3, Min-soo said. Alliance building. We identified species that were oppressed by the Council. We offered them quiet support and hinted that alternatives to Council membership might exist. Soo-jin had personally handled many of these contacts. The Cathani, whose complex biology meant the Council barely invested in their medical care. The Velkar, who were treated as second-class members despite their long history. The Praxa, who had rich resources the Council wanted but no military power to resist exploitation. We never promised them anything specific, Soo-jin said. We just showed them that we understood what it was like to be used. And Phase 4, Min-soo continued. Colony establishment. While the Council thought we were desperate for their territory, we were actually founding independent colonies in unclaimed systems. The holographic display showed dozens of human settlements beyond council borders. Each one had been established quietly without fanfare. Officially, they were research stations or mining outposts. In reality, they were self-sufficient communities that could serve as the foundation for an independent human network. 20 years, Sujin said, looking at the full timeline. 20 years of appearing weak while building strength. 20 years of doing the galaxy's hard work while preparing to leave. The council never saw it coming, Minsu said. They thought we were grateful for their tolerance. They couldn't imagine that we were building leverage. Not begging for scraps, Sujin replied, echoing the words she had used in countless strategy meetings. The holographic display shifted to show current events. The Galactic Council was in emergency session, and Sujin had access to their communications through intelligence assets that had been cultivated for years. Chancellor Korthax was facing a rebellion. Species that had depended on human services were demanding action. Some wanted military intervention to force humanity's return. Others were threatening to leave the Council and establish direct relations with Earth. The Valorian Empire has lost control, Minsu observed. They maintained power by controlling resources and maintaining the hierarchy. Now that hierarchy is collapsing, Sujin watched the council session devolve into arguments. The Threxians were demanding that the Valorians fix the infrastructure problems. The Valorians were insisting that the Threxians provide military support to intimidate humanity. Smaller species were simply leaving the chamber, refusing to participate. It's beautiful, Sujin said quietly. We didn't destroy the council. We just removed the support beam and the whole structure is collapsing under its own weight. Dr. Sung-hee is requesting asylum, Minsu said, highlighting an incoming message. She wants to defect from the Valorian Empire. Sujin pulled up Sung-hee's profile. She was the analyst who had tried to warn the council about humanity's importance. The council had ignored her and now she wanted out. Granted, Sujin decided. She understood what we were doing before anyone else on their side. We can use that intelligence. The command center continued to monitor council space. More stations were failing. More species were trying to contact Earth directly. The carefully constructed hierarchy that had maintained galactic civilization for thousands of years was disintegrating. Ambassador Tamian wants an update, Minsu said. Sujin composed her report carefully. She outlined the current state of council collapse, the increasing desperation of their offers, and the growing number of species seeking alternatives to council membership. Recommendation? Tamian's message asked. Continue current course, Sujin replied. Let the council collapse completely. Then we offer the alternative, because that was the final phase of the plan. Humanity wasn't just leaving the Galactic Council. They were preparing to offer something better. A voluntary association of equals, where no species was exploited and all contributed according to their strengths. The Independent Systems Alliance, Minsu said, reading Sujin's report. You think species will join? The ones who were treated worst by the council will, Sujin replied. The ones who watched us walk away and wished they had the courage to do the same. We'll start small, but we'll grow. On the holographic display, another station went dark. Another piece of the council's infrastructure failed. Another crack appeared in the foundation of galactic civilization. They thought we were weak because we did the hard work, Sujin said. They couldn't understand that hard work builds strength. That the people at the bottom of the pyramid are actually holding up everyone at the top. And when we left, the pyramid collapsed. Minsu finished. Sujin nodded. Not because we wanted to destroy it. Because we refused to hold it up anymore. She turned back to the displays showing council space in chaos. Somewhere in that chaos, species were learning a lesson about exploitation and gratitude. About taking people for granted and discovering too late what they had lost. It was a hard lesson. But it was one the galaxy needed to learn. Humanity had walked away from the table, and in doing so, they had revealed that they were never sitting at the table at all. They had been the table itself, supporting everyone else. Now they would build a new table. One where everyone had a seat and no one held up the others. The revolution had begun. Not with weapons or violence, but with the simple act of saying no and walking away. And the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after humanity's departure from the Galactic Council, Captain Jae Sung guided the Dauntless Dream through an asteroid field in unclaimed space. His engineer Young Mi monitored the sensors while navigator Dae Hyun plotted their course through the tumbling rocks. Contact ahead, Dae Hyun announced. It's the Cathani colony ship Blessed Path. They're right on schedule. Jae-sung opened a communication channel. This is Captain Jae-sung of the human vessel, Dauntless Dream. Welcome to the rendezvous point. The Cathani captain's voice came through, translated by the new systems humans had developed. Captain Jae-sung, it is good to speak with you. We have 3,000 colonists aboard, ready to begin construction of the new settlement. We've already started preparing the site. Jae-sung replied, You'll have basic infrastructure ready by the time you land. This was the new reality. Humanity wasn't returning to council space. They were building an alternative network of trade routes, settlements, and alliances in independent territory. Species that left the council or had never joined were finding that humans offered something the council never had. Genuine partnership. Young Mai looked up from her console. The settlement's reactor is running at optimal levels. The Velkar engineers did good work. That's because we're actually teaching them instead of keeping secrets, Daehyun observed. That was the key difference. The new Independent Systems Alliance that humanity had founded operated on mutual respect and knowledge sharing. When humans built a reactor, they taught their partners how to maintain it. When they developed new technology, they shared it freely with allies who did the same in return. Back on Earth, Ambassador Taemin sat in a conference room with representatives from 17 species. This was the founding council of the Independent Systems Alliance. Each species had an equal vote. Each contributed their unique strengths. No one was subordinate to anyone else. The Galactic Council has sent another message, Hyun-woo reported. They're offering everything we originally requested. Full membership, equal voting rights, fair trade, technology reciprocity. They're even offering reparations for past exploitation. It only took the complete collapse of their civilization for them to consider treating us fairly, Ji-won commented dryly. The Cathani representative, an elderly diplomat named Catherine, spoke up. Will humanity accept their offer? All eyes turned to Taemin. This was the decision that would shape the future of galactic civilization. The council was offering surrender. Everything humanity had fought for was now on the table. Taemin was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he shook his head. No, he said simply. Why not? Asked the Velkar representative, a being named Vex. You achieved your goals. The council is giving you what you wanted. They're giving us what we wanted 6 months ago, Taemin corrected. But we've seen what's possible now. We've built something better. He gestured to the assembled representatives. Look around this room. 17 species working together as equals. No hierarchy, no exploitation. No one forced to do the dangerous work while others enjoy the benefits. This is what galactic civilization should be. Catherine made a gesture of agreement in his species manner. The council only changed because they had no choice. When they recover their strength, they will return to the old ways. Exactly, Taemin said. The council's nature hasn't changed. Only their circumstances have changed. We're not interested in joining a system that only respects us when it needs us. So what do? Vex asked. We send them a response, Taemin said. We acknowledge their offer. We note the improved terms. But we decline membership in the Galactic Council. He pulled up a document he had been preparing. Instead, we extend an invitation. Any council species that wishes to join the Independent Systems Alliance is welcome to do so, as equals, with no conditions except mutual respect and fair dealing. Across council space, Dr. Sung-hee was reviewing the same offer in her new office on Earth. Her assistant Bora sat beside her, both of them having defected from the Valorian Empire when it became clear the council leadership would never change. They're going to reject it, Bora predicted. Chancellor Korthax would never accept being equal to species he considers inferior. The Chancellor won't accept it, Sung-hee agreed. But individual species might. That's the point. She pulled up intelligence reports showing the current state of the council. It was grim. 23 stations had been permanently abandoned. 17 species had withdrawn from active council participation. The Threxian Concordat's government had fallen in a coup led by reform factions. The Valorian Empire faced rebellions on 6 colony worlds. The council is dying, Sung-hee said, not because humanity destroyed it, but because it was always built on an unstable foundation. It survived by exploiting weaker species and maintaining a strict hierarchy. When humanity removed themselves from that system, The whole structure collapsed. And now humanity offers an alternative, Bora said. Yes. One that species can choose freely, without coercion or exploitation. On the Valorian homeworld, Chancellor Korthax read humanity's response with growing fury. His crystalline body blazed with angry light as he addressed the remnants of the Galactic Council. They refuse our generous offer, he announced. They compound their insult by inviting our member species to abandon the Council and join their primitive alliance. But the chamber was half empty. Many species had simply stopped attending council sessions. The ones who remained looked exhausted and defeated. What do you propose we do? Asked the Threxian representative, Cleth's replacement after the coup. We must show strength, Korthax insisted. We must demonstrate that the Council remains the supreme authority in galactic affairs. With what? The Threxian asked bluntly. Our infrastructure is failing. Our economy is in collapse. We can barely maintain our core systems, let alone project power. Korthax had no answer. The truth was that the Council had lost. Not through military defeat, but through irrelevance. Humanity had simply walked away and built something better, and other species were following their example. Over the next months, the diplomatic channels between Earth and other species became increasingly active. 7 species formally requested membership in the Independent Systems Alliance. 12 more sent unofficial inquiries. Even some species that remained in the Council established quiet trade relationships with human space. The Alliance accepted new members carefully, ensuring each one understood and accepted the principles of equality and mutual respect. There were no junior members, no probationary periods. Each species contributed what they could and received benefits according to their needs. Captain Jae-sung watched as the new settlement took shape on the asteroid his ship had helped claim. Humans worked alongside Cathani and Velkar and Praxa, building something together. When the Cathani struggled with the reactor systems, young Mi taught them patiently. When humans needed help adapting to the local gravity, Velkar engineers shared their expertise freely. This is what it should have been all along, young Mi said, watching a mixed crew of humans and Cathani installing power distribution systems. Yes, Jae-sung agreed, but the Council couldn't see it. They were too invested in maintaining hierarchy. Do you think they'll ever understand? Daehyun asked. Back in the conference room on Earth, Ambassador Taemin finalized humanity's official statement to the galaxy. It was brief and simple, avoiding grand declarations or accusations. The Independent Systems Alliance operates on principles of voluntary cooperation, mutual respect, and equal partnership. We do not seek to rule the galaxy. We do not seek to be ruled. We seek only to build a civilization where all species can thrive as equals. Any species that shares these values is welcome to join us. The choice is yours. He transmitted the message through every available channel, ensuring it would reach species throughout known space. Then he sat back and waited to see what would happen. The responses began arriving within hours. Some were hostile, accusing humanity of destroying galactic unity. Others were curious, asking questions about how the Alliance operated. But many were hopeful, from species that had been exploited or ignored by the Council and saw in humanity's example a path to something better. 1 year after humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, the Independent Systems Alliance included 32 species. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Fewer than 20 species remained active members, and several of those were quietly establishing relationships with the Alliance. Chancellor Korthax resigned in disgrace after his homeworld voted to open trade negotiations with humans. His replacement immediately requested talks with Ambassador Taemin about possible Valorian membership in the Alliance. On a new trading hub called Unity Station, built cooperatively by 6 species in Alliance space, Young Mai stood beside engineers from 4 different worlds as they brought the station's main reactor online. It was based on human technology but improved by Cathani insights and Velkar innovations and Praxa creativity. Power flow is stable, one of the Cathani engineers announced. All systems showing optimal function. Young Mai smiled. This reactor would never cascade into failure like the one on Terminus Hub had. Because everyone here understood how it worked. Because knowledge was shared freely. Because they had built it together as equals.